Welcome to another episode of the Soul Man Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Battisto. Today's guest is one of my coworkers, one of my good friends, someone I consider to be a mentor is Kirk Moore. Kirk Moore had founded the Frontier Wrestling program in 2006, as well as founding Elite Force in 2007. He's been the head coach or was the head coach at Frontier until I want to say like 2017, 2018. And it's kind of come back in a big way after COVID, and taken on a lot with our youth club. Been asking him to come on the show for a long time, and finally he's coming on the show. We're going to be talking about a little bit of his wrestling philosophy and kind of what it was like getting Frontier and Elite Force going. And then we're also going to be promoting our camp. We have a couple camps coming up. One more in July, and then another one in August. So hope you guys enjoy the show, and thank you guys for following along. Yeah. So what's been going on this summer, man? You've been taking some vacations and spending some time with the fam.
Yeah, we just got back from Mexico and the Bahamas. Took a little, I think, 7 or 8 day cruise with the family. Other than that, getting ready to go to Colorado tomorrow morning with my son. Do a little hiking for about 4 or 5 days. Other than that, a couple wrestling camps coming up, and pretty much we'll be back at work in 3, 4 weeks, 3.5 weeks. So it'll be quick.
We had like a UFC watch night, and I think Rachel was over, and she was saying that you and Wyatt were like up in the mountains somewhere, and like she wasn't getting cell phone service or anything like that. Is that something that you guys normally do together?
Yeah, usually my oldest son and we spend a lot of time together in the mountains. That's kind of like our thing. His our thing is wrestling. His thing is the mountains. So
Yeah, I think whenever you can get like a chance to get away and kind of disconnect, I always feel like I don't know, I always just like feel refreshed and like feel good when I come back.
yeah, I mean you got to take breaks without a doubt. I know when I was his age, I'd take the summers at least for a few weeks and go up and visit my grandparents. And anytime you can just take a check and get out, it's always a good thing. Always feel good when you get back.
Were you wrestling a lot during the summer when you were in high school?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about that today, really, because of Jaden and how he did at Fargo, and really, it was kind of strange because I think our high school program really focused on the high school season and high school aspect of things, and then when the season kind of ended for us, there wasn't necessarily like, oh my gosh, you got to go to Fargo or you got to do these things wrestling wise. It was more or less like, hey, you got to get some workouts in, and CSUB was open, and we'd kind of go in there and roll around. But like as far as like a structured practice that we're trying to accomplish certain things, that really wasn't our off season. When I was in high school, was just basically get in there, get some lifts in, and then open room at CSUB. Sometimes we'd go to Cal State or some BC and we'd work out there, but most of it was drive 4 o'clock, go into Cal State, and then basically have Coach Kerr yell at everybody and wrestle for an hour and a half straight. So pretty much it.
You're kind of just left to your own devices, just figure it out.
Yeah, we had a really good group of wrestlers when I was going through, and so we kind of band together and we'd hop in a van, hop in a truck, and 6 or 7 of us would just show up at CSUB, and that would be kind of our team. But as far as like a structured summer type thing, nah, we didn't really do that too much. Sometimes we'd see our coach in there. Coach Paradise would go in, and he'd wrestle around every once in a while, but really wasn't what we did.
I'm always trying to think like what's the right amount of working out over the summer. And I think like you got to have a balance. Like you can't just do absolutely nothing for an extended period of time. But at the same time, it's like kids are just going on trips and they're going on vacation, and it's hard to get everybody consistently being there for longer than a few weeks.
Yeah, I think the landscape of wrestling is changing. Kind of like when I first started coaching, we had a lot of kids who didn't know how to wrestle. We didn't have like a feeder program coming through, and so for us it was always how do we get the most out of the wrestlers that we have currently, and so we did a lot of folk style. We focused on top and bottom. We went to a couple of camps, went up to Clovis. They had some summer tournament duels up there, and then we had something up in out in Las Vegas that we did. But as far as like the whole Fargo push and freestyle push, we really didn't do that too much. We kind of left the kids up to like, hey, if you want to do it, it's out there. And I think looking back, you just kind of have to look at the kids that you have and go, what are we going to accomplish with this certain group of kids? And some of them, it is just like you said, they're going to be going on vacations. They're not necessarily maybe as dedicated, and wrestling's not their number one priority. And if you're grinding them through the summer, they're just not going to be there. It's just not something they want to do. But then you might have a group of kids who are like, yeah, we're focused in, and we're thinking about becoming All-American. We're thinking about wrestling at a high Division I level. And if those are the goals, you don't really have an option of taking large amounts of time off anymore. You just can't do it. Not if you're going to be the very best. I do think it's important to schedule breaks. So like after Fargo, taking a few weeks and just kind of decompressing, get out of the weight room, get out of the wrestling room, and just be a kid again. It's probably a good thing. But if you let that linger all the way into September and October, you got Super 32 coming around. You can't just show up to that tournament unprepared and not ready to wrestle. So it is a really hard balance now for coaches, parents, and athletes to balance that. It was easy when I was going through. It was all about high school.
Yeah, and that's something that even just when I was just thinking about Jaden, it's like when he gets back from Fargo, it's like I would like him to take some time off, like just because I know once we get into our fall preseason stuff, he's just not going to have that time. And the same thing with Nate and our guys that are having coming back. It's like if you are going to take some time off, like take some time off like now, because once we get into our preseason, it's going to be pretty busy.
Yeah, I was thinking about them and like, hey, if they're dying to do something, like switch it up. Go to the gym and hit some laps in the pool, or go play some volleyball, go play pickleball, get some yoga in or whatever. But as far as like structured, purposeful wrestling stuff, just take a few weeks and just be a kid, man.
Yeah, because you don't get that time back.
No.
It's weird thinking about, and maybe it's easier for us because we're teachers, and we do get some summertime. But even with Emma, it's like we came back from like a little trip, and she had work the next day. I got to sleep in a little bit, So I try to be grateful for it. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah. So
when you first took over Frontier, you have a lot of guys that, how many guys that were on those for a couple teams that had wrestling experience coming in?
When we first started our freshman sophomore class, I think the wrestling experience for them, I think Torrey Casper had wrestled like a year, his freshman year, and that was it. I think we had maybe a couple other sophomores who had wrestled maybe a year their freshman year at a different high school. But as far as like kids, that first group that had wrestled, zero experience, brand new room. They didn't know what wrestling was. They didn't know what singlets were. They didn't know what putting their headgear on backwards, putting their headgear on, and their things are sticking out the side. And you're like, what are you doing? They're putting on a singlet and they're all pumped up, running around the wrestling room. I'm like, what's going on here, guys? They just had never, like, we had, I think, 60 something kids and no experience whatsoever. And then that 8th grade group and 7th grade group that was going to come through, we had Josh Lopez, we had Alex Gomez. They had wrestled. Obviously, Alex had wrestled for a while and was fairly successful. Josh, a little bit. I wouldn't say he was extremely successful at the youth level. And then I think about 3 years into that, I think we had Vincent Gomez come in. And he was probably our first true kid who had gone to Reno, wrestled, year round, pretty successful, high accolades coming in. But really, when we started, it was bare bones. They didn't know anything.
So how do you where do you start? Like, because you have 60 kids in there and, our wrestling room's pretty small. So are you you're splitting up practices? Like, are you splitting up by weight classes?
Was pretty rough. I didn't want to burn out our coaches that we had in there. And so we would run like a JV/varsity practice for the kids who are a little bit more athletic. And I think school got out around 2:30 at that time. So it'd be like 3 to 5. And then right after that, we'd move in our JV kids, go from 5 to 7. And then right after that, we'd be moving the youth kids in and go from like 5 to 9 or it's 7 to 9 or whatever it was. So we were pretty much there from the time school got out till it got dark. We were in the wrestling room. for a long time.
So as you're kind of getting the high school program going, you're also getting the club program going at the same time.
Yeah, we started the club program. I think the very first, I think Frontier opened up 2006, and if I can remember right, uh, they did like a introduction in like May or something like that for the incoming kids. And so we had a list of athletes who thought they might want to wrestle or thought they were going to play sports. And so we started calling them. So we worked out that summer before school started with our first group of kids. And then that spring, so it would have been, I think, like 2007, whatever that first spring was, that's when we started the club. And again, we brought in, I think my nephew Ryan was like the first group that we brought in. I think they were 5 years old or something like that. So we brought a bunch of rookies in, and then we just went.
And that group too, I mean, that group of 5-year-olds, I mean, that's some of like Frontier's most successful teams that they've had.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. I'm sure it's got to be cool kind of seeing them when they're 5 and then watching them kind of grow up into high schoolers now being young men, and a couple of them come back and coaching.
Yeah, it was it just kind of started falling into place. We had Ryan and we had Jonathan Garcia, and then a little bit, a couple years go by, and then all of a sudden you have a Elijah Osuna, Noah Osuna, end up coming in. They were down south and they just moved to Bakersfield. They never wrestled. They thought they were baseball players, and they're just like, hey, we want to wrestle, and they're pretty athletic. And then all of a sudden you get a Willem DeBoer, and then you get a Trent Tracy, and then Olenek came down from Hollister, and then all of a sudden we started looking at this room. We're like, man, there's some pretty good kids in there. And then all of a sudden you got a Jaden Abbas show up. And I think he was maybe like first year Bantams or whatever. I think they called it back then. So he was like 7 or 8, and he was coming into the room. And before you knew it, we had a room full of probably 15 kids, 20 kids who were wrestling at a pretty intense level at a really young age. And it got really fun coaching those kids. And obviously I had Sean and Daniel coaching with me, and we had more fun coaching those little kids sometimes than we had coaching the high school kids, because they would just battle with each other, and we'd just be so impressed with the stuff they could do and the intensity that they brought to the room. We had great parents. I would probably say that's probably some of the best times was those little kids right around when they're like 8 to 12 years old, and they just got with it. It was a lot of fun.
So is it more just those little kids that are just getting after? Is it like kind of seeing their understanding of the sport kind of growing and like maybe believing themselves like, hey, this could be something I could be good at?
Yeah, I mean, I think right around that 4th or 5th grade year, you start seeing kids who kind of start going, I think I'm going to be a wrestler. And then as a coach, obviously, then you're going, okay, well, in 3 more years, you're going to be in middle school, and then you're going to be in high school. And then so you start getting excited, like, and you start trying to put your team together, and you're starting to calculate like how good are these kids going to be, and how good is this team going to be. And I think Sean and I and Daniel and eventually Carlo, we kind of started looking, going, this is easily a top 10, top 5 team. We're going to have multiple state placers here. We're going to have some state champs in this room. And even at that young age, we saw like, we knew that Isaac and Jaden, Ryan, we knew those kids were college wrestlers. And I think, obviously Jaden and Isaac, multiple All-Americans in college, but we got to see that at a really young age and kind of got to identify it. And we knew what they were going to do. We knew the success they were going to have just because of the level they wrestled at and the intensity that they brought on a day-to-day basis.
Was that something that when you first started coaching at Frontier and created Elite Force was like, all right, this is going to be a program that's going to be producing college wrestlers, and we're going to be, contending for, state championships individually. And, is that something that you were thinking about, or was it just like, we're just going to go in there, we're going to try to just do a good job and kind of see where we land?
I don't think just for me personally, and I don't know how other coaches are. I'm not really into the, leave it to fate or good job and let's see where things go. I remember when I interviewed, and maybe I was a little bit too optimistic when I interviewed for Frontier, when I was sitting down with Dr. Bruce. I basically was like, hey, within 5 years, we should be at this level. Like, we should be a top program in the state within 5 years. Because the way I looked at it is, well, if you can't coach kids after 5 years to a certain level, then probably another 5 years, you're really not going to get them there anyways. And so I kind of went into the whole thing of, we want to chase titles. We want to be a program that when you walk into a gym, people know like these kids are here, they're going to do really well, they're here to compete. And that was always the mindset. And when I talked to Sean, I talked to Daniel, that was their mindset. We weren't just having a good time. It wasn't just kind of show up and, these kids are going to do whatever they're going to do. We had a mindset that we were going to win. And if we weren't going to win, we were going to definitely be the toughest kids on the mat. And so, yeah, from day one, it was win. And maybe, obviously it didn't happen within 5 years. It took a little bit longer than that for Ryan's group and Trent's group to come through. But I do think throughout the Valley, even after our first couple of years, I think people kind of saw like, yeah, this team, they're doing the right things, and it's only a matter of time.
Dude, 5 years is pretty bold. Like to think you can build like a championship team in 5 is crazy.
The way I looked at it was, I wrestled with a guy named Ryan Malash. He started as a freshman, and then by the time he was done his senior year, he's one of the top kids in the state. He ended up, having a bad state tournament, but then he went to BC, won 2 juniors titles at BC. And so kind of I looked at Ryan and was like, well, if Ryan can go from his freshman year never wrestling, and then all of a sudden by the time he's a senior, he was realistically probably a top 5 kid in the state his senior year, then why can't we have multiple Ryan Malashes? And so, yeah, I was optimistic, but that was the goal, is that you should be able to take freshmen and you should be able to get them at a state level by the time they're a senior, if they put the right time in, and as a coaching staff, you're doing the right things. Now, obviously, with the way California is gone the last few years, the last decade, that's harder and harder to do. This is almost 20 years since I started coaching. 20 years ago, you could probably get away with it fairly consistently. Now, that is a tall task now. California's just deep, and the level of kids are wrestling now. I mean, heck, I think we got 2 high school kids on the world team. It's just amazing the level that kids are performing at. So it's a task, I would say, to start as a freshman and get to a top 8 type position by the time you're a senior. Not impossible, but you better be in the right program and you better be really, really serious about it, or it ain't gonna happen.
It's super hard to do. And I mean, that's a good point too. It's like 20 years ago it was different. It's like now it's like in each region or each section, we kind of have like these super teams, if you will. And, back in 2006, 2007, if you got 100 points at the state tournament, like you're probably contending for a state title. Now it's like you get 100 points, you're probably in the top 10, maybe, top 8. And teams that are getting 270 plus points at the state tournament, I mean, that's kind of where you need to be if you're going to contend for a state title. So it's kind of crazy to think like it's changed that much. Do you feel like with all this talk about like super teams and California has 1 division, I kind of want to get your perspective. What do you think about splitting up into divisions, or should we just keep it a 1 state tournament?
I mean, I know I've researched the information and the history and everything that goes with multiple state championships. And hey, from a college recruiting standpoint, I'm a 2-time state champion from Division II or Division III or whatever. But to me, wrestling in California, growing up here, you should never get away from what we have. 1 state champ, 1 tournament. Yeah, it's a meat grinder. Yeah, maybe there's kids who get left behind, and I know there's some, things like, hey, if you got a small town, you got a high school, and maybe they're Division 5 and they win a state title, and it's going to build a community and it's going to get more kids out for wrestling. I get all those things, but man, there's just something special about going to Rabobank and seeing all those mats down and knowing after 3 days there's only 1 person standing. I mean, I would say don't get rid of it. Maybe they can incorporate like some semi-state stuff for some small schools the weekend or 2 weeks before, but don't get rid of ours. That would be my take.
Somebody had messaged me and they were, and this is something I talked about on the podcast before, but I think somebody made a post or something, and it was like, California really needs to change like their 1 state division because kids just aren't getting seen. And it's like, well, I understand that argument, but like if you kind of challenge that, if you look at states that do have multiple divisions within it, those schools or those teams have to go outside the state tournament and go get more exposure. They have to go to Fargo. They have to go to Super 32. And with California, like, if you make it to the California state tournament, you're probably good enough to wrestle at the next level. Or even if you were a round away, like to qualifying, you're probably good enough to wrestle JC or a lower division school. I just think it's kind of interesting to hear that perspective when it's like, if we do switch it in divisions, now it's like our state tournament isn't as, competitive. But I think you do see a lot of kids that, okay, maybe we go 1-2 or 2-2 at state. They're going in wrestling division 2, or they're going in wrestling, JC in California.
Yeah, I think what really hurts in that argument is California is not like other states. We only have a handful, if that anymore, of actual colleges that offer wrestling. So if you're in Pennsylvania, or you're in Iowa, or you're in the Midwest, there's tons and tons of colleges. And so, yeah, you might be a 3A 2-time state champ, but you're not going to Penn State necessarily, but you might be going to one of their lower level colleges and you're wrestling there. It's just California's different. We just don't have the college exposure that other states do. It's just one of those things. And so, yeah, if you want to say, well, I didn't place in the state meet, so now I'm not going to be able to wrestle. I don't agree with that. I think you can go to Freak Show, you can go to Super 32, you can get on obviously Fargo teams. If you're wanting to wrestle in college and you are a decent athlete, a decent wrestler, then there's a school for you. You just have to work hard. I look at Cal State, and I think the thing that made Bakersfield so special was the kids that were recruited to Bakersfield weren't necessarily like blue chip athletes all the time. But what they did is they kept those kids from their freshman year all the way till their senior year, and they kept them in the program. And you're looking at Jake Andrews, a perfect example of that. He's a senior, wrestled all through, and now he's a national qualifier. I think he may even got his highest ranked 20 in the nation. That happens a lot if kids can make it through the program all 5 years. And I think, if you're a kid and you go to the out of California or something like that, and you don't experience that success right away, and all of a sudden you're quitting your freshman year, your sophomore year, you never get to experience what it could have been like if you would have just stayed 2 or 3 more years of wrestling. And I think that's what Cal State is known for. They're just known for kids who stay the entire time, and they just are tough because they're 23-year-old men, 22-year-old men, and they're ready to go.
Plus, like, I think the environment of those rooms when it was Joe C. and TJ Kerr and Mendoza and Manny Rivera, and things have kind of changed a little bit during COVID. And I think Smith is trying to rebuild the culture a little bit. But when we went into that room, it was like we just fought, like we just scrapped, and there was some technical stuff that was there, but there's definitely some things that I'm not sure if I would ever coach like that. But I think what made that room special was the kind of chip that we would have on our shoulders. Like, we understood that, like, we were a community funded team, and like we showed up when it was time to go to community events, and we try to get back, whether that was through our camp, or if it was going and reffing on the weekends. Like, we would do all that stuff just because we knew it was important to get back to our town. I don't know. I feel like, the way things are now, I think, some of our kids just maybe don't quite understand maybe what goes into keeping that program going. And I think, I'm not sure if that's so much like just kids that are in, going to CSUB, but if it's more beyond that, if it's also just high school kids, maybe not quite understanding like just what it takes to kind of build a culture and build a team like that.
Yeah, I remember going into Cal State just in high school, and wasn't your typical practice. I mean, it was summertime, slap hands, and then you're wrestling for like an hour and a half straight. It's just like, what are we doing? What are we doing in the summer here? But that's how TJ Kerr ran his program. And I remember talking to Olenek and some stuff like when Kerr first came over there, it was a culture shock between the old CSUB and Kerr's guy, because the old CSUB, they might not have been in the greatest shape come November, and they might have lost matches in November, but the time nationals came by, they were ready to go. Kerr's guys, dude, November, they're in the greatest shape of their life, because that's how he did that. And I was thinking about him a couple of weeks ago, and just thinking, he was running a college program as a wrestler. Like, that's crazy to think how much he cared about the sport to actually take that on as a young man running a wrestling program and then also coaching it and wrestling it. It's just that, he saved multiple programs just by his effort.
Kerr did that?
Yeah, back in San Jose State when they were going to end up dropping the program, I believe he ended up stepping up. Right, it's either he wrestled his senior year and coached part of it, or he was, or he just graduated and went into the program. But yeah, he basically said, "I'll do it." And then when he came to Cal State, I think it might have been like 85, 84, somewhere there when he came into Cal State. When he came down here, it was like, we're going to be in the greatest shape of anybody. And the old Cal State guys were like, what are we doing here, man? Like, why are we running at 6 o'clock in the morning? Why are we doing this? This is October. What are you doing, man? But he was just had a different mentality. And again, if you look at the results, I don't think another California school is placed higher than CSUB. They're the nation.
Are there things that maybe you picked up just from either, guys like Coach Kerr, or just from other coaches that you've been around? And maybe what are some things that early on you try to implement that you maybe pulled from other people?
I had great coaches. When I grew up wrestling, I just fell in the perfect situation. I wrestled for the Junior Express, which was an established program. They'd been there for a while. My first coach was a guy named Mark Loomis. He wrestled for Cal State Bakersfield. He's a heavyweight. And I just remember he was great at storytelling and catching kids' attention, but he also really reinforced just being mean. Like he was a mean guy. He liked to hurt people. And when I started wrestling, that was just kind of like, man, this is fun. Like I'm going to inflict pain upon other people. And it's just our personalities clicked right away. And it was great. And he coached me probably 3 or 4 years. And then I had another coach come in, Bo Steinbach, who wrestled for Cal State Bakersfield also. He was a lightweight, and Bo was really technical, very skilled, high-level wrestler. And he kind of polished that same thing. But the same thing with Bo. Bo was mean. He would hurt you in a minute if he felt you weren't going hard enough. And so I kind of just took wrestling as you're supposed to be tough. And when I started coaching, I think that's one of the things I really wanted the kids to understand is no matter what, we got to be tough. We got to leave a mark. We got to let people know, like, even though you beat me, hopefully you don't want to wrestle me again because it was a miserable experience on the mat. And so that was probably the biggest thing is just be mean, be tough, try to win, give it your all. And I got lucky. I fell into great coaching.
And I think, that's kind of been the standard that you had really for a long time. And I think, as a coach, you kind of added to your game and had some assistants that maybe were doing things a little bit different, like Franciotti and Sheets and, Chapman and those guys that were coming in from different programs. What are some things that you felt like, okay, like this is the way that you have been doing it, but as you kind of increase your staff and Frontier gets better and better, and you're kind of maybe working with people that think a little bit differently, how do you kind of go about doing that?
It's hard. I think you got to bring in coaches that you trust, coaches that you get along with. And I think you got to be honest with yourself and just kind of assess at the end of the year, like who did we have on the team? What did we do this year? What did we accomplish? And for who we had, did we maximize what we had? And in some years it was, yes, like these are the kids we had. This is the results. We maximized everything and it was good. And then other years it was like, hey, we probably should have done a little bit better. And I think about midway through coaching, Carlo and I started talking about changing how we peak for the end of the season. And maybe my mentality was you work hard all the way through. Like you grind and you grind and you grind and you run yourself into the dirt. And that's just how I was. That's how I grew up. That's how I trained. And then it was kind of like, hey, maybe that's not the greatest way every single time, every single week. And so we had to kind of take a look back and say, how can we add in some rest days, some recovery days? We started adding in morning lifting and just kind of started just changing a few things we did. And all of a sudden that state tournament, we started having a little bit more success. But I think it takes a lot as a coach to kind of look back and go, did we really maximize these kids? And if we didn't, why did we not? And there were a couple years that we didn't, and I think we fixed that. And I think for the most part, the last few years, we really, in my opinion, we maximized the kids we had on our roster. Like there weren't too many kids where we felt like man, we should have got one more match. We should have got one more medal. I think we kind of peaked for the most part at the state tournament at the right time.
Yeah, and Frontier, I think, finished in the top 10 three times.
Yeah.
I want to say like 2016, 2017, 18.
Some,
Um, like that. I mean, that's a pretty good stretch of guys, not just qualifying for the state tournament, but getting medals and Trent Tracy being a state champ. Like that's pretty special.
yeah, it was a good run. We had like a little mini run before that with Vincent Gomez's group. We had a couple kids in there. We had Alcantara, I think he was a placer. Vincent was a placer. As Trent was kind of graduating, we had a couple kids. Jonathan Garcia, Elijah Osuna was like right before that, just a couple of years. But yeah, it was a good run. We were always relevant when I was coaching. And I think that's an important thing to do, is make sure that every time you're showing up to the state tournament, you got guys who are relevant, guys who are going to do something, and it's good to see.
So when you say relevant, these are guys that are like going to go out and they're going to compete for state medals. Like they're part of the conversation.
Yeah, they're part of that conversation. They step on the mat and they're supposed to be there. And I think after I was done coaching, I think Miguel Estrada obviously kind of stepped in, and he was relevant for 4 years. And then you had Brock Rios this year step up and get a medal. And I think the important thing is to not only have one or two guys, but we need to get back to where you have 4 guys, 5 guys, and eventually, a full team. I know you said something about super teams, but that's the ultimate goal, is to compete with the best, compete with the Buchanans, the Gilroys, compete with the Clovis schools, and say, hey, you know what? By the way, yeah, we got 10, I mean, now it's going to take 10 guys, 12 guys, not making the state meet, but actually getting on the podium now. And so I think that's an important goal to have as a coach, is don't just settle for the middle. Don't just settle for like, well, we got one guy. Well, if you got one guy, you can have 2 guys. If you got 2, you can get 4. And if things fall into place, then you should be one of those teams that are at the top.
So obviously, those are things like results wise, like you're trying to look for, because they're good indicators of, on the mat success. Are there things that you feel like are important when you're trying to establish, hey, we're obviously a good team in sense we're going to go out and compete, but how do you kind of measure, I guess, like a team's culture?
I think for like, I kind of break up our team, my coaching, into 2 different categories, 2 different time periods. One is like the Trent and the Jonathans, the Ryans, that group, and then the group before, the Josh Lopez's, the Vincent Gomez's. And I think that first group that we look at and we kind of measure their success is, a lot of those kids weren't necessarily state qualifiers. Heck, they weren't even, some of them weren't even valley placers. But that group, we've got guys who are in the Navy, guys who are in the Marines, we got firefighters, we got cops, we have a very, very successful group of men. And Alex, out of that group, she's a very successful woman. And I think when we look back, they're all in their 30s now, and they're living very, very, not just productive lives, but successful. They're people that I look at and go, man, I'm really proud of them. I'm really proud of an Alex, a Josh Davis, who's helping coach BC. I got Diego Oropeza. He was in the army. I mean, it's just great to see those kids. And then obviously the second group with Trent and Ryan and them, they're in their early mid 20s, and so we really haven't seen what they're doing later in their life. But that first group, without a doubt, man, just they grew into men. They grew into men. Tori Casper, I mean, heck, you look at Tori. He started as a sophomore basically with us, and 3 years later he wrestled a little bit at BC, wrestled a little bit at York, started coached a high school program, started a club, and now he's going back to school. I mean, this is crazy to think how wrestling in the program impacted him.
That's something that way I first started coaching, like I didn't really expect that part of my life to be so important, is seeing what kids are doing after. Like I always thought, like, yeah, we're gonna have some great times, we're gonna have some great moments, and get our hand raised, compete really hard and train hard, and that was gonna be the reward as a coach. But it's cool, like like Josh Shepard just got his commercial pilot license. Like that got me fired up. Or like, Brock kind of going with his gut and kind of doubling down on his wrestling this past summer, and like and really selling out, and the relationship that we got to develop. Or like Miguel telling me, after his last year, after not winning a state title, it's like, hey, thanks for making wrestling fun. Like those are like those big moments that I always kind of think back on. That I didn't really expect to be those highlights, but those are like my coaching highlights. Like those
Yeah.
are the most fun times.
I told the high school team a few weeks ago, I said, winning really, I don't mean to say that it's not hard, but really creating a winning program where you're winning medals and putting kids in the state tournament, that's really not, it's not that hard if you're doing the right things. And so I tried to tell the kids, it's not necessarily about winning, it's who you win with. If you can win with the right group of kids, that's special. I mean, you build lifelong relationships with these kids. I mean, I talked to Josh Bailey a couple of weeks ago. He went to the Naval Academy, and he just called me up. I saw him walking at church, and then called me up a couple of days later, and it's just like, that's what it's about. It's not winning, it's who you win with. Because, there's times where you might coach a group of kids and they might be really successful, but they weren't necessarily going to be successful later on in life. And that would kind of burn you, like, man, we were good at the wrestling part, but we weren't good at the life part. And if you can get both of those things together, like, man, we're good at the wrestling, but also that life part, we're doing the right things there too. That's when coaching becomes special, in my opinion, is when you can mix both of those.
Yeah, and I think right before I came in, and I came in like right as kind of COVID was ending. But it seems like Frontier had some issues when you stepped away, and there were some coaching changes that were happening, and the kind of that dynamic of our club and the relationship between Elite Force and Frontier kind of wasn't as strong. But it seems like in the past like 3 or 4 years, like you came back and played a bigger role with the club again. Tori had left and then had come back, and now we're merging with Next Gen. Carlo is like one of the probably the best technicians, best wrestling minds that I've ever been around. I feel like there's a lot of really good ingredients, and we're kind of hitting that point where those kids that are coming out from our club are now kind of entering the high school. And then that group that's going to be our senior class this year, really just a big group and a lot of really good kids. It just seems like things are kind of coming together and we have a lot of momentum. Like, how does it feel, I guess, from your perspective? Like, what are some things that you see? And are there any similarities that maybe you've kind of noticed in Frontier programs in the past?
What I think is when I coached the first time through, I really kind of like doubled down on one group of kids. And, I kind of had a really good relationship with Trent and Ryan and Jonathan and Willem and that first group, Jaden, Isaac, etc. And I kind of just ran with them. And I just ran with them all the way through middle school and into high school. But I didn't really dive down and build the relationships I should have with the younger groups. Yeah, I had Miguel, I had Bryson Tablet, I had some of these other kids that kind of were trickling in on the tail end of the other kids. But as far as like an entire culture, an entire family, an entire program, we really didn't have that connection with the next group and then the next group. And I see what we're doing now with Tori and you and Espejo and all the coaches that we have. I think there's a great connection from a first-year 5-year-old to somebody who's in the 8th grade ready to go into high school. I think throughout the program, there's just things in place that is going to make sure that the structure is going to continue all the way through, no matter who steps in or who's coaching or who's not coaching. And I think that's the biggest mistake that I made early on is I didn't connect everything through. And so when I left, there was a little bit of a gap. There's a little bit of a vacuum. It took a while to kind of fill that back in. And I think we're on the right track now. I think I'm really excited. I mean, I'm almost more excited about coaching 5 and 6-year-olds now than I am coaching, 7th and 8th graders. It's crazy to see how the club has changed in such a short period of time. We got a lot of people in the right place. We got a lot of numbers, and it's up to us as coaches and leaders. Don't screw this up, because I really think we got something going right now.
Yeah, and we didn't even talk about the youth league. we're coming up on year 3, and like that's been super special because we're able to build these relationships with administrators that trust us. And we added a bunch of schools for the last season, and now it's like we get to run it back for year 3. And I'm super excited for that. And I like how you said how there's like this connection from you start wrestling as a 5-year-old all the way until you're a senior in high school. I feel like I could go into any practice and I'm excited to be there. It doesn't matter if they're like first year wrestlers in high school or first year middle schoolers or first year 5-year-olds. It just seems like, everybody's excited to be there, including like the parents and the wrestlers.
Yeah, I think definitely excited. It's funny how, as a coach who's been coaching for a long time, that what it means for a young kid. I mean, we're dealing with like 5 and 6-year-olds just coming in the room excited to be there. And all of a sudden you're like, all right, this is pretty cool. Yeah, I'm going to be here for an hour and a half, but that's a funny little kid over there and he's having a blast. Or after practice, they give you a high five or they come up and give you a hug and you're like, all right, like this means something to them. And when it means something to them, it means something to us. And so, yeah, I'm excited to where it's going. I mean, we started a girls practice this year for the first time, and we were running that. And I think we ran it for, I don't know, about 10 weeks, 10 practices or something like that. And I think there was 20 to 30 girls from high school all the way to, like I said, 5 years old rolling around in the room together. And to see that's something that we wouldn't have done 10 years ago. And now it's something we're doing. So I think we're checking all the boxes. We're making sure it's done correctly. And it's exciting. I mean, we got some good little kids. They're gonna do it. I mean, I'm really excited about them.
And coming up in the next, I think it's next week, is I think our second camp of the summer, right? Or maybe in 2 weeks.
Yeah. Next week, the 24th, we have next camp 2. And that's something we didn't do in the summer a while ago. We would just we'd end with Freestyle State and we just kind of release the kids and say, see you back in the fall. And we were coming toward the end of the spring season, the freestyle season. And I had so many parents just like, what are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing? I'm like, we need to be taking a break is what we need to be doing. And I was like, what do you mean what we're doing? And they were just like, what do you mean? Like our kids want to keep going. And I'm like, all right, well, we gotta manage this correctly. Like you can dive in and go 365 and everything and then get burned out in a couple of years. And that's not a smart thing to do. And so we're like, okay, well, what can we do to keep these kids on the mat, keep them excited, keep their parents excited? And so we're like, hey, let's run a couple camps throughout the summer, just 3-day camps, nothing crazy, nothing insane. We're not going to run them to death. Just we'll expose them to technique that they don't usually get exposed to during the season. And so I think camp 1, we had like 45 kids in there and they're, different ability levels, different age groups, but we showed a bunch of throws and different things that we don't usually show. And they had a blast. And this coming camp, we're going to work on some leg attacks that we've been working on as a group and kind of polish those up. And we'll probably have another 45 kids in there, but it's just enough to keep them involved in wrestling, but not too much where you're overtraining a young kid. And then we added some speed and agility training. Again, parents kept asking. So we're like, well, let's just add some speed, some plyometrics, some core strength training that we can do. So we're not necessarily on the mat grinding over and over and over again. And we've had throughout basically the summer, anywhere from 20 to 40 kids twice a week showing up, doing box jumps, doing ball throws, doing cone drills, ladder drills, nothing wrestling, no moves, no techniques, no grind, no beating each other up, but just kind of getting on the mat. And I actually think that the facility that we're working on with Next Gen, we got to come up with a name for it, but whatever's going on there, the kids are starting to look at that as a place they want to be. That's like becoming like their little second home. And it's not like a second home where I see kids getting out of the car and they're like trying to crawl back in the car and the dad dragging them out. It's a second home where like the kids are jumping out, running, coming into the room, laughing, giggling, playing with each other, grabbing the equipment. And you're like, what's going on, man? Whatever it is, it's working. And we gotta be really measured and make sure that we balance this through just being kids, enjoying life, playing other sports, but also making wrestling the focus. So it's a balance. It really is, because we're not trying to just produce necessarily a super team of a handful of wrestlers who are good. We want kids, multiple kids, tons of kids who might not ever make the varsity lineup in high school, but they stay with wrestling throughout. And maybe they're a senior and their team's just stacked, and they try to go up, they try to go down a weight, and it's just like, man, I got a state champ here, I got a state placer here, and I didn't make the team my senior year, but I've wrestled my entire life, and I love the sport. And that's what I think is really cool right now is we're touching and reaching so many kids who we might not even call super athletes right now. They're just kids who love showing up, and we're not turning the door on them. We're giving opportunities, so it's fun to see.
And I think when we have that mentality of we're focusing on the process, I think that's when really good things happen. And not just about, again, that's like we're obviously very competitive people. I mean, we both won our cornhole game. Representing Team Black at Frontier. We basically won the Titan Trophy for us.
Oh yeah, we
crushed it, but
we want to win. We're competitive without a doubt, but it's to a level where if you have a first or second grader, man, it's really hard to look at that kid and go, well, he's not going to be a wrestler. How do you know in the first or second grade? That you just don't know. So you want to keep everyone tied into your program, offer something for everyone, make everyone feel welcomed. Obviously, you want the Reno placers, because if you don't have the Reno placers, the Tulsa placers, you're not having kids, train at these big tournaments and do well, then you're obviously not doing enough things right. But you also don't want to be running off kids who in 3 or 4 years, wrestling might have been the difference in their life. It might have been the thing that just got them through the day. So I think that's important to make sure that, one, you got to win. You got to produce high-level wrestlers. You got to be doing the right things. But you also got to be reaching out to a lot of kids who need wrestling. They don't necessarily need the Reno title, but they need wrestling.
Absolutely. Kirk, it's been an absolute blast having you on the show finally. I feel like I've been begging you to come on the show for, I don't know, a long time now. Before we end, you got anything else?
No, just, I think we're all trying to do the best we can. And parents, trust in the process. Wrestlers, trust in the process. Believe your coaches. And even if you're not part of our club or part of Kern County or Bakersfield, good luck to everybody. Wrestling has changed a lot of our lives, and it's probably why we're the people we are today. So always give back to the sport. Always try to do the right thing. Always remember that somebody's watching you, somebody's looking up to you, and what you do might impact their life, might change it without you ever realizing it.
All right, that was Kirk Moore on the Silman Wrestling Podcast. Again, if you guys haven't liked and subscribed to our YouTube channel, we're also on Spotify and all the major social media platforms. Thank you guys for following along, and we'll see you guys next time.